The recession was tough, but the outlook is even worse.
In the boom years, we became a nation of borrowers and spenders. To survive the recovery, we're being told to start saving instead.
But with interest rates at an all-time low, is there any incentive to save or invest for the future?
And how much will our homes be worth, not to mention our pensions? Or are there better ways to invest our money to help us beat these tough times?
Tonight, savers are losing billions.
The savings issue in the UK is nothing short of an absolute disgrace.
But is there any hope?
You make your savings work for you rather than you working for your savings.
Property on a knife edge. Is now the time to invest or sit tight?
You can't go wrong with bricks and mortar is my motto.
Prices in Kensington have gone down. Prices in Cheshire have gone down.
But they've all gone down, but they've all started to come back up.
Nest egg nightmares. Why high street banks' advice could wipe out your life savings.
I'm furious and I'm bitter.
And treasure hunting. We try to find the very best investment. Hello and welcome to Money Watch. Tonight we're in London, the financial capital of Europe and home to a vast savings and investment industry. We're all being encouraged to save more, but with interest rates so low, what's the best way to conserve our cash?
For many of us in Britain, our most significant savings are tied up in our homes. And with periods of spectacular price rises over the last 30 years, bricks and mortar have looked, well, as safe as houses. But after the sharpest fall in house prices for decades, followed by a faltering recovery, are our homes such a reliable asset? That's what Andy Verity's been trying to find out.
Whatever happened to the house price crash? I'm hoping I might find the answer here in Sheffield. Across the country early last year, the average house had gone down by £38,000. But even while the worst recession in more than 60 years was still on, prices bounced back, and they're now less than 10% below their peak.
That might seem to prove that no matter when you buy, your dream home is always going to make you money. But if you're thinking like a professional, is now really a good time to be making the biggest investment of your life?
Here in Sheffield, the average house price surged by nearly £20,000 last year. But now prices are slipping again. In the past, Alan and Rather Bridger have each separately made more on property than they could ever save. Then they got married, and now they're looking to their family's future. They feel ready to buy.
So how do you look on property as an investment at the moment, Alan?
I think property is still a good investment. You know, you put your savings in a traditional bank and people are wondering, is it safe? Whereas in property, there's bricks and mortar, so it's still a good place to put money. And that's what I've done.
Encouraging them to buy is their estate agent, Linda Crapper, who says she's made money on her property investments for 3 decades.
On the right-hand side over here, I've just bought this recently. I've got a couple of properties there which have been fantastic investments. This is a car park I partly own. This is my latest investment. My property portfolio at the moment is worth at least £2 million plus. You can't go wrong with bricks and mortar is my motto.
I can think of a way that it might go wrong. It might go wrong like this. You might buy in a peaky market where prices are very high compared to earnings. Then 5 years later, you might be forced to sell. What if you can't sell it because the market's frozen and because prices are falling?
Even if it dips, as long as you've put a substantial deposit, you've done your sums and your homework, it will always work for you.
That's Linda's point of view. But could her confidence be misplaced?
If you think house prices are going to fall to more normal levels, you might save big money by waiting to buy. Right now, the average house price is about 5 times what the average person earns. But over the long term, that average number is 3.5 times. So if prices are going to fall to that level, you could save
£46,000 on the average house.
Of course, if you don't think house prices are going to fall, you don't have to worry about that.
Professional investors don't like buying assets when they're overpriced.
You're looking to try and buy a house,
Yeah.
350,000, where do you start?
Henry Pryor is a professional property finder who's in Sheffield to help Allen and Rather find a good investment. So what does he think about buying now?
Would you acknowledge that house prices are now overinflated?
Well, it entirely depends where they are. Look at that backdrop. Here's Sheffield. House prices in Sheffield are still trading at a 15 to 20% discount to where they were at the peak of the market. Because people can't be certain about what house prices are doing at the moment and what the future direction of house prices is going to be, that uncertainty gives the professional property investor an opportunity to negotiate, and to negotiate hard.
Henry wants Allen and Rather to approach their buying decision with their heads, not their hearts.
Okay, I think you're going to like this. It's good space, isn't it? All done very recently. Dining room here and then through to the garden. It's all properly done, isn't it? He's facing morning sun.
Yeah.
So, there you've got it. Perhaps more than you were expecting, I think. I think it's got lots of potential if you're just looking solely at the money side of it. If you're looking as an investor, it's got lots of space, lots of flexibility, and most importantly, the people that live here, they are committed sellers. As an investor, that's what you want to be seizing upon, and that's what you want to take advantage of. So,
Not. Somewhere we've got to be happy. I mean, we haven't spoken about it, but for me, it's not the house I'd want.
So, no luck for Henry. But Linda thinks she's found a home they will fall for, and it's in their area.
Ready? Yes. Lovely big crew lounge dining room.
It's a nice sized garden and it's flat, which is exactly what we need. It's a nice road to live on, and it's very close to the school. We could walk to school. I feel quite positive about it. It's in the right area.
Yeah, I think it's a potential good buy.
But will Henry agree with that? There's a trick professional investors use that anyone could copy to work out if a house is a good value investment or not.
well, one of the first things we do is try and work out whether the numbers actually stack up. And one way of doing that is to look at the rent that you might notionally expect to get on this house compared to the price you're going to be paying. Here in this house, we reckon we could get £10,000 a year, and we look at that as a proportion of the money that's being spent on the house in the first place, in this case, £250,000, and work out what that rent is as a proportion of the money you're spending, which in this case is 4% gross.
OK, now that's like a rate of interest, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's what we call the yield, and that enables you to be able to compare this asset class with others, such as a bank account, stocks and shares and the like.
4%? That's not much more than I could get by putting my money on deposit without taking any risk to my capital.
Absolutely, and you wouldn't have the associated concerns that that these guys will have in terms of buying bricks and mortar.
So, Alan Rather, what do you think? I mean, comparing that with a deposit, you're not getting a great yielding asset. It's not a particularly good investment.
Well, we've got to live somewhere, and if we don't buy, then we have to rent. And I still think long-term, mid-term, as an investment, property is good, and I think it is an investment which we can enjoy because we're living here.
I think the priority is to get the house that we want in the area that we need to be in, and from a heart point of view, that's my priority.
Your heart rules your head?
Yes.
What I've come to realise is that people tend to buy houses not so much because of, but in spite of whatever's happening to prices. And for decades, that didn't really matter, because if prices went down one year, they'd go back up again.
Right now, to some cold-hearted investors, houses look overpriced, a risky investment. But for determined buyers, that hasn't yet shaken their faith in bricks and mortar.
Financial journalist Paul Lewis and Oxford economist Linda Yueh are with me. Linda, when you look at property prices, what do you think they're going to do over the next 12 months and also further into the future?
It's very difficult to call in the short term because so much of it depends on the availability of mortgages, and the credit crunch is still with us, so banks are reluctant to lend. But of course, if you look beyond the next 12 to 24 months, house prices on average rise about 4.5% per year. So that means that the average house will double in value in about 18 years. So it makes it a pretty good long-term investment.
Paul, Linda talks about the availability of mortgages. How difficult is it to get one nowadays?
It's very difficult. First of all, you need a perfect credit record. So if you've got a flaw, if you've missed a payment on your credit card, you won't find it easy to get a mortgage. Secondly, you need a big deposit, a quarter of the value of the home you're buying, probably, which for an average home is £40,000, a lot to save up. And thirdly, of course, you need the income to be able to pay that loan off.
But they're difficult to get now. Is it going to get easier?
No, it's going to get more difficult because the regulator, the Financial Services Authority, has told the banks they must be tougher when they look at people for mortgages. They're going to stop people saying, well, my income is so much, and the bank says, OK, unless they see proof. They've got to see proof of your income. Very difficult for some people who are self-employed or on contracts. And secondly, they've got to make sure that you're able to pay off your mortgage over the 20 or 25 years. So it may see the end of interest-only mortgages, which a lot of people have relied on recently.
But Linda, at the end of the day, I mean, property is a pretty safe place to put your money, isn't it?
Well, it is. So long as you've bought it at a good price and you can afford your mortgage, you can enjoy living in your house and think that over the longer term you will get your investment back. It's not quite the same thing as, say, investing in the stock market.
No, but if you need a house now, buy a house, because it's a house, not an investment.
Somewhere to live, absolutely.
Yes.
Paul, Linda, thank you. Justin.
Now, many of us say we'd like to save, but either can't afford to or are simply put off by interest rates. The Bank of England base rate is at a record low, and for many, it doesn't make saving seem worthwhile. So how can savers get a better deal? Libby Potter has been to meet one man battling to save Britain's savers.
Compton in West Sussex, the quintessential English village. One pub, one shop, and one church. Life is slow, and it looks like the living is easy. But looks can be deceptive. Interest rates have been slashed to keep the economy going. That can be great if you're borrowing money, but savers are losing out on more than £18 billion a year, and at least one man has had enough. Parish priest John Strain is spearheading a nationwide campaign to get a better deal for Britain's hard-hit savers.
John, why did you start campaigning for savers?
I've been shocked by the stories of quite ordinary people about how they'd tried to save for many, many years, but now they were approaching retirement, they could see such little reward for their savings. Those who have been profligate and borrowed heavily seem to be rewarded at the moment with very low interest rates, and hard-working, prudent savers have suffered. It's very distressing.
John is bringing the campaign close to home for the first time and is organising a meeting of disgruntled savers.
So this is the main village bulletin board, is it? So if this does its trick, do you think we'll get many people coming?
I hope so, Libby. Savers tend to be quiet, long-suffering people. People who've had a lot to contend with. But I hope they will come.
So is there any hope for savers? John wants some answers, and we're going to try and get them. First stop, Mike and Patricia Ellis. They've been saving their whole adult life and hoped to be comfortable by now. But since the cut in interest rates, Mike's been forced to go back to paid work, and Patricia's looking for a part-time job.
So take me through the numbers. What's actually happened to your savings rates?
Well, to give you an illustration, back in 2007, we were getting 4.5%. Today we get 1.3%.
Wow.
So it's very substantive, the drop that has occurred. And it seems quite unjust to decent, ordinary people who have lived quietly, prudently, done the best they can for this blessed country, and we're rewarded with this kind of behaviour.
So could savers like the Ellises do any better? The odds are against them. This year, for the first time ever, there wasn't a single instant access saving account that could beat inflation after tax. So, in real terms, many savers are making a loss. So why are there such paltry deals on offer? We've got an appointment with financial advisor David Braithwaite, who thinks that however bad the deals are, we should still try and find the best offers out there.
What we tend to find is people are upset about the rates they're getting, but very few people actually do something about shopping around and voting with their feet and moving their money to a higher paying account.
But why have all the good deals disappeared?
But the problem comes back to what happened in the banking crisis. The Bank of England had to step in and shore up the banks with billions and billions of pounds. So, we have the pot of tea here being the Bank of England. Now, all these cups here are the banks. So what they did, they shored up all the banks and filled their cups up with money. Now, the trouble comes is that when you then get the savers coming in, over here, there's not much room left in the cup. They're not thirsty enough for the savers. And that's the problem that's actually happened with our banking system and why the savings and the interest rates are quite low.
£850 billion of taxpayers' money has been made available to the banks to stay afloat. Is that really why they're not hungry for our savings anymore? To find out, John's taking his mission to the very heart of the banking industry, the City of London and the British Bankers Association.
Over the last few years, the banks have received billions of hard-earned money from taxpayers. Do you think some of the efforts that the banks are taking could be directed to increasing some of the very low rates that savers are receiving?
I don't think they're necessarily designed to provide greater returns for savers or perhaps equally to reduce borrowing costs for borrowers. It's simply to make sure that the system as a whole maintains its integrity, and that has to be for the benefit of all of us. So I don't know that it's as straightforward as simply saying take some of that investment and pass it on to customers by way of a better savings return.
When will this change, though? I mean, there must be a point in the future when savers can expect to see some sort of reasonable return on their money.
Well, I think as the economy recovers, it's likely that the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee will react by increasing base rate. As base rate increases, then, of course, the returns to savers will increase at the same time.
So the banks say those billions of pounds were to keep the system intact, and there won't be any move on savers' rates until the Bank of England raises its rate. Time for John to report back to his parishioners. Back in the village, they've turned out in force. In fact, it's standing room only.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to take a seat. It's a story about people who worked hard and deserved, and felt they deserved, much better, being savaged by poor policies by the government and by an inadequate system of banking.
We have so much health and safety, but we don't have enough health and safety with savings.
I went to the Building Society where, again, I was told I was getting 0.5%.
I think the savings issue in the UK is nothing short of an absolute disgrace.
I think one of the encouragements I want to sort of pass on to people is find out what your savings rate is. We need protection for savers in extreme circumstances. When interest rates fall terribly low, we need better rewards for savers.
For the people in this hall, at least part of the mystery of their missing money has been solved. Their only respite will come when the Bank of England raises its rates. Until then, they'll have to work harder to get the best deals on offer, however disappointing they may be.
So the savers amongst us hoping for better times. But despite rotten returns, what are we doing with our spare cash? Here's Justin.
During the boom years, we steadily lost our savings habit. This graph shows the percentage of our income that we save. And look what happened in early 2008. The graph goes negative. Now, what that's telling us is we were spending more than we were saving. But look what happens when the recession hits. Savers started putting more of their money into the bank, but they weren't happy about it. This line shows whether we think it's a good time to be saving or not. And look at this. As the interest rate falls, our perception of the savings climate falls with it. Having said that, we're still saving significantly more than we have for years. As the downturn made us into a nation of prudent savers, though, well, only about half of us have savings of more than £500. That's about the average weekly wage. And a third of people in Britain, well, they don't have any savings at all.
Paul Lewis and Linda, you are here again. For savers, are things going to get better?
They will get better because at the moment, of course, nobody's earning a great return if you put your money in the bank because the savings rate is so low. It's based on this record low interest rate set by the Bank of England. But as the economy recovers, this interest rate will go up and therefore accrual to your savings account will also increase. And the other thing to keep in mind is there's tons of regulatory changes now to make banks safer. But one particular one will help savers in that banks are going to be asked to hold more deposits. So they may go back to the kind of days where they compete for our savings. And they would offer attractive rates to do so.
So, in theory, it should get better, but in practice, it's not necessarily going to, is it?
Well, I hope it does, but my feeling about the banks at the moment is they don't really want to take our money. They don't need our money to lend it out again, and so they keep the rates low. And even if the bank rate rises, interest rates on your savings are so disconnected from the bank rate that if it goes up 1%, 2%, I don't see why savings will necessarily go up by the same amount, which will leave people even more annoyed with the banks than they are now.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because recent research shows that more and more people are actually putting money aside, but that's new for us. I mean, we're not a nation of savers, are we?
No, there's been a real big culture change in the last 30 years. So back in the 1980s, when there was big financial changes and credit cards became available, it started to change people's attitudes towards credit and consuming using credit cards. And that's really permeated to today. So yes, at the moment, I think we've all sort of feel like we've learned our lesson. But as these things take time to adjust and our attitudes change, we may find that this high rate of savings, our tendency to save at the moment, doesn't last.
No, but let's hope at least people do save to buy something. They don't bung it on the credit card. They save up first, then they buy it. That would be a very important change.
Paul, Linda, thank you. Well, more from Paul and Linda later on, but it's 3 weeks now since our Money Watch family first met with money-saving expert Martin Lewis. This week, he's trying to help them get the most out of their savings.
Hello!
Hi.
You're right. Hello.
The Merrimans are on a crash course in budget tightening. Already, Martin's looked at how they can get more income and cut down on their spending.
Ah, my cheap wife.
This time, it's all about doing better with savings. Grandparents Colin and Gloria are relying on their savings, but they're not happy with how they're doing.
Money we had in ISAs seemed to have plummeted.
And their children, Christina and William, are saving for a deposit on a house.
I want to get on the housing market, I want to get somewhere, I want to get on with my life.
Martin is getting straight down to business.
Do you want to sit there, Martin?
Lovely.
Mum and Dad of two, Anne-Marie and Graham, have suffered a massive fall in income during the downturn, and they've stopped paying into a pension.
It's the one subject that probably causes a little bit of conflict in the house because Anne-Marie's desperate for us to have a pension and a good one.
You are in denial. I have the opinion that we actually need to find the money and we need to almost go without now.
The truth is, if you want to maintain the lifestyle you've got now, if you don't put into a pension, you will have a cold-baked bean future. Right, now let me give you the equation that scares the pants off most people. Take your age when you start putting money into your pension, which is now...
Yeah.
Come on.
40. Thank you.
There we go. Halve it.
20.
That's the percent of your salary you should be putting in for the rest of your life in order to retire on 2/3 of your final salary. Very rough rule of thumb. But any money you're putting in your pension now will help.
While Graham and Anne-Marie wonder how they'll pay for their retirement, grandparents Colin and Gloria are already living off their pensions and savings. Martin wants them to ensure they're actively seeking the best rates.
Just doing my numbers here, effectively on the £79,000 of savings that you've got, you're currently earning less than 1% after tax on average. I'm sorry to say that's an awful rate. It's pitiful. If we were to move it into the very best account and we got the same amount of money, £2,580, which is just shy of £1,800 a year more. A year! So that's year after year if we do it right. I mean, we've more than trebled your interest.
No.
But I suspect over the last 10 years, looking at these figures, I would think it's, what, you've lost out on a good £10,000 to £15,000?
I think you've given us a wake-up call, Martin.
Good. Cheers.
Cheers.
Back at the house, their children, Christina and William, are checking on their savings.
This one's better, but a bit more.
They've been putting money away for a deposit on a house, but have they been putting it in the right kind of savings accounts?
Now, one of the keys when it comes to savings is it's not just getting the best rate, it's what savings vehicle you use, where to start savings. So let's start with this one. First place is a cash ISA. Now, the key with the cash ISA, no tax on the interest. The problem with cash ISAs, though, is there is a limit. £5,100 per year. Where would you go next after the ISA?
Regular saver.
Perfect. God, you're brilliant.
I have absolutely no idea about any of this stuff. I don't know what you're talking about.
Once you've done that, the overspill level... Oh, I love doing it. A regular savings account. Now, these are special accounts that can pay really high rates of interest. The problem is there's only a certain amount of cash you can put in them. Once you've filled your cash ISA, you've filled your regular savings account, then all the overspill, everything that's coming in there needs to go in. It's brilliant, isn't it? Needs to go into normal savings accounts because there's no limit on those. Now, if you're wondering why I've got so many glasses, that's because saving safety means you're only protected up to £50,000 per person per financial institution. Hooray! Look at that. Fantastic.
This family has saved thousands of pounds by following some simple steps. And it's a lesson for us all. No matter how hard the times are, we can usually make our money go further. And that's surely worth cracking open the fizz for. The budget variety, of course.
Cheers.
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 Martin Lewis is here now, together with Graham, Anne-Marie and Christina. So you saved yourself thousands of pounds there. Was it really as easy as it seemed?
Yes. No, it was. With Martin's motivation and direction, it really is that easy.
Well, he's good at that, isn't he? But the question is, will you go on doing it? Anne-Marie?
Definitely. I mean, now we've made the changes, it's going to be easy for us to just keep with those. So, yeah, definitely.
I need to pick up on that. Have you actually made the changes? Because I remember I came on 3 weeks and a couple of times I asked you things. Can I give them a quick test?
Go ahead.
Do you mind? All right. It was £430 a year from memory, switching gas and electricity. Did you actually do it?
Yes.
Fantastic. Cashback credit card? I knew I'd get you. I knew I'd, because twice I asked you, and I told you I'd ask you that today. The other one, you were happy downshifting to the Jaffa cakes, much cheaper Jaffa cakes, but there was discussion over the curry sauce. You hated the idea. You were paying £2, 9p was a cheap one. Have you bought it? Have you tried it?
Yes, we've tried it, and actually the children preferred it.
It's amazing. It's amazing. How much have you saved on your supermarket shopping? Because that was the big one.
If I do a shop now, from original shop of £120 is now down to 80.
Yeah,
amazing.
That's £2 a year.
What about you, Christina? Are you going to continue with the advice he gave you?
Yes, I've already made the changes that Martin suggested, and I've got a ISA now which is giving me a better interest rate. I'm saving into a regular account with a better interest rate, so savings all round really.
You have saved them an awful lot of money though. I mean, what should people take away from this?
It is about putting it into practice. There is nothing more important. You have to consider being an active and aggressive with your money. If you're passive and you let it fester, you're throwing lots of cash away. So the big lesson is take a day off work, take a few hours. They will be, I've said it before, they will be the best paid hours of your year.
Martin and our Money Watch family, thank you. Well, with economic turbulence making it pretty hard to get a good return on our savings, Many high street banks have been encouraging their customers to discuss alternatives with their own in-house investment advisors. But the advice hasn't always had the outcome the bank's customers were hoping for. Indeed, as Andy Verity has been finding out, in some cases there have been disastrous consequences.
Aldeburgh on the Suffolk coast. A great place to retire if your ship comes in. But in these tough times, how do you stop your savings just ebbing away?
Interest rates are so low that savers are putting record amounts into investment funds just to try to make their money work a bit harder than it does on deposit with a bank. Now, those savers know they're taking on extra risks, but if they get bad advice, they may end up taking far bigger risks than they thought, and even losing a large chunk of their life savings.
Sue Merton came to the coast for an easier life. She wanted to make her money work harder, so she went into Barclays for investment advice. The way it worked out, though, it's Sue who's been working harder just to make ends meet.
So tell me what happened to you.
I wanted something which was a cautious to medium risk investment, is what I thought I was going into. It would just give me a modest sort of amount of money every month or quarter to enjoy my retirement.
Barclays put her £50,000 into what was called a balanced fund. But when the markets went into freefall, so did Sue's money. Eventually, she pulled out, realising a loss of £17,500.
How's that affecting your future?
Well, it's certainly not the cosy retirement that I was hoping for. I'm furious and I'm bitter.
Sue wasn't going to take this on the chin. Convinced that Barclays gave her inappropriate advice, she wanted to get her money back. She asked the independent financial advisor, Richard Davis, to look at her case.
Why do you believe the advice was unsuitable for Sue?
The fund was a newly launched fund, 60% in stocks and shares, which are notoriously volatile, the other 40% in junk bonds and exotic financial instruments, all of which you would not expect to find in the portfolio of someone entering retirement.
It can be good advice to make risky investments if it means bigger potential gains. But you have to be made aware of the risk and be willing to take it. The Consumer Champions Which tested all big banks on that crucial point and used older people for their investigation, because the nearer to retirement you are, the less risk you are likely to want.
So we sent 11 undercover researchers over the age of 55 into the branches of all of the major high street banks and building societies to see what kind of investment advice they would get. Out of the 37 visits that we made, we actually only got good advice in 4 circumstances. These clients were being advised to put their capital into products where they could have lost some or even all of that. And this isn't just something we were seeing at 1 or 2 branches, this is what we were seeing in banks and building societies across the countries, every single brand.
Barclays isn't the only bank which could do better. But recently it's attracted more complaints to the Financial Services Ombudsman about its investment advice than any other banking brand. Heather Spicer was nearly 80 when Barclays in Colchester offered to help her do better with her money. And they wouldn't stop offering.
Each time I went in, the cashier said, "Oh, Mrs. Spicer, you know, you should see one of our financial advisors about your account. You could do better." And I really began to feel that it was harassment.
She didn't like their approach, but it worked. Eventually, Heather did make an appointment and an advisor came to her flat.
What did this money mean to you?
Well, it meant everything to me because, first of all, it was the money that my husband had left to me when he died. And this is the money that I had put by for myself when I would need it. I mean, for care, hospital, all that sort of thing.
This time, Barclays recommended a cautious fund, But it wasn't as cautious as it sounded. Heather's investment quickly lost nearly £40,000.
What about Heather's case? What was going wrong there?
Well, Heather's case, frankly, was outrageous. She was churned out of investments that she'd held for many years. To move her into a riskier investment environment was simply unconscionable. It began to become clear that the salespeople involved were maximising their sales by selling existing investments and moving them into this new fund without due justification, but simply to increase the commission available to them.
Regulators have tried to stop financial advice from being biased by commission or bonuses. Independent advisors will soon be forced to charge fees instead, so they'll be under less pressure to sell. But there's no such plan for advisors at the banks.
I think the heart of the problem is the way that the branch sales staff are remunerated. So in most cases, they're being given quite tasty sales incentives to sell products which may not be suitable for the vast majority of customers that walk in the door. Hopefully there will be a day when the quality of advice on our high street banks and building societies is up to scratch. But today, our advice is steer clear of them.
So, what about the people who didn't steer clear and lost big money? Heather Spicer threatened Barclays with a complaint to the Ombudsman, and the bank eventually did pay compensation.
I regret that I ever started it. I'm glad it's all over. People who've been in my situation and haven't had the help that I've had, I don't know how they can cope if they suddenly lost so much money.
As for Sue Merton, when I first met her, she had been fighting for full compensation for 2 years. In June, we were alerted that the Ombudsman had made a final ruling. Then a letter arrived. Sue had won her fight.
I feel chuffed to conkers. I mean, I've got my money back. Nothing can ever pay me for that awful feeling of seeing my money going down and down and down. But this is compensation. This is as good as it gets.
The British Bankers Association says banks act with care and integrity and can only work with the information given to them by customers. As for Barclays, it says its advisors are not incentivised to sell any particular products, and it has extensive controls in place to ensure a high standard of service. 3 weeks ago, Sue went into her local branch of Barclays to deposit her compensation cheque. The cashier asked her if she wanted to see an advisor about how to invest such a large sum. She politely but very firmly declined.
Thanks, Andy. Well, I'm now joined again by Martin Lewis, and we're going to look at some commonplace savings issues. We've got 3 people with questions about their savings. We'll start with you, John. Now, you've run up quite a bit of debt, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right, Justin. I've spent 5 years at university. I've got about 30 to 40 grand's worth of debt.
And you're now thinking to the future. You've got a job now?
Yeah, I've got a job, and I'd love to save some money, but... Don't save! Stop! I don't think I can make it any clearer than that. Look, the point is the amount you earn on savings is pitiful compared to the cost of debts. Simple example, high street credit card 18%, after-tax savings interest 2%. You've got £1,000 in the savings account, it's earning you 20 quid a year. The card's costing you 180 quid a year. Pay off the card with the savings, you're 160 quid a year better off. What's the interest rate on your debts? 7 to 8%. Well, you're never going to get that in a savings account, so absolutely, your best way of saving, the way you earn most, is to pay off those debts. But because they're not on credit cards, so you can't borrow them back, I'd keep a small emergency fund aside just in case you need it on top.
I've got another issue for you.
Yeah.
Galena, now you've got a mortgage, haven't you?
Yes.
The mortgage rate has fallen, is that right?
That's right.
So you're wondering, should I save or should I pay off the mortgage?
That's right.
It's a very similar dilemma to what we had before, except the rates are more subtle. The golden rule here is if the after-tax rate on your savings is lower than the interest on your mortgage, then financially you are better off repaying the mortgage. But there's a couple of big buts. One, will you have penalties if you overpay the mortgage? If you will have penalties, well, it's very rarely worth doing. And two, you must always have an emergency fund, because if you weren't able to repay the mortgage in future, the fact you'd overpaid wouldn't protect you. You would still go into arrears. It could be a big problem.
OK, one last issue
Right.
for you. This one's a bit more straightforward. Let's see how you get on with this. Julie, you're in the happy position of having savings. You want to know whether they're safe, is that right?
How do I know my savings are going to be safe?
Well, this is the golden rule. You are protected in a UK regulated savings account up to £50,000 per person per financial institution. What is a financial institution? Get ready for this, it's complicated. Halifax Bank of Scotland, sister banks are one financial institution, so money in there is one lot of £50,000. Royal Bank of Scotland, NatWest, also sister banks, two separate financial institutions. You get £50,000 in each. It's all about their licence conditions, so you really have to dig into it to find out whether you're protected. It's not as easy and as obvious as it seems, but spread your money in £50,000 pots and you'll be fine.
Brilliant, thank you very much indeed. Thanks, everybody. Now, if you're lucky enough to have any funds to spare, one other place you could consider putting it is a pension. But the old certainties are vanishing. Traditional company schemes linked to salaries have been closing fast and are being replaced by pensions with far less predictable outcomes. And the recession and its aftermath have made prospects for people saving for retirement even more doubtful. Rajan Datar has been to York's most famous department store to find out how staff there are planning for their financial futures.
We used to think a steady job would often bring a generous pension. Not anymore. In York and elsewhere across the country, few of us are saving enough for our retirement, and the downturn has made matters worse. At iconic department store Browns, staff are offered what's called a defined contribution scheme. It's a typical workplace pension these days, as it's less expensive for employers than traditional schemes, which used to guarantee a certain income on retirement. But it still costs Browns 10% of its profits.
Hello. Hi there. Nicholas.
Nice to meet you.
Nicholas Brown is the managing director. His family own the business. Staff who join the pension scheme make a contribution from their wages, which Browns matches.
The employee can make a choice to join us or not, and it's up to their choice. We try and actively encourage that, because we feel it's a generous scheme, that anything from 3% to 5% is a maximum. They put in from their wages, and we match it. So actually they're getting effectively a pay rise the moment they join it.
How much is a staff member guaranteed to get when they retire, if they carry on with this pension scheme?
We can't guarantee them anything. What goes up can come down. And I think they're fully aware of that, and particularly the stock markets, you see them moving up and down. But in general, I think most people understand that they will get more and substantially more out of the scheme than they're actually going to put in.
Even though they can't be sure what they'll get on retirement, many staff, like Vicky, think it's a scheme worth joining. Since last summer, she's been paying £30 a month into her pension.
I guess over the last few years I have thought about it more, and I know, talking to my parents and other sort of friends and colleagues, I realised sort of last year that it was something I really needed to get into, so I decided to join the Browns one. As I, speaking to colleagues that are also in it, said it was a really good one to join.
In menswear, Peggy has been paying in for a lot longer and is topping up her contributions to £112 a month, as she wants to retire in 2 years' time.
Peggy, tell me how important this pension is to you.
It's very important. About 9 years ago, my husband was diagnosed with cancer, and obviously our circumstances changed. Where he was in a good job, he had to retire early, and so now my pension is very important to go towards keeping our, a nice standard of life and paying the bills.
But will their pensions give them a comfortable retirement? I'm sending away their details to an independent advisor to find out. According to many pensions experts, the outlook is not good. Occupational schemes invest contributions made by staff and employers in assets like shares.
Although they've been doing better recently, share prices are still 20% lower than 2 years ago.
The recession has hit the stock market, and many people are relying on increases in the stock market to deliver them good pensions over the long term. And the worse share price performances are, the lower the value of most people's pensions.
To make matters worse, many employers can't afford to make up the shortfall by contributing more, and neither can employees.
The recession has really aggravated our pensions crisis and has prevented people from being able to put much money into pensions. So they have little money, spare money to put aside.
At Browns, it's no different. Of the 120 staff who could pay into the company pension, only 47 actually do.
There we are. Thanks very much.
Carly's been with the company for 8 years, but she's not started a pension.
They've got a pension scheme here at Browns. Why aren't you signed up to that?
Just because I can't afford it. I've got too many outgoings, like my rent and all your other bills.
How much would you need to contribute in order to start your pension pot going?
Maybe about £20, £30 a month, which for me, I just can't any possible way do, especially when it's coming out on a regular basis. It's going to cut me back short quite a bit on a lot of things, especially when I've already made cutbacks already.
So, what kind of retirement can Carly, Vicky and Peggy expect? We met up after work to discuss their futures, based on our experts' analysis and the predictions from Brown's pension provider.
Carly, you haven't got a company pension and you'll be relying on the state. You will end up with a weekly income of £132.60.
That doesn't sound too bad, actually.
OK, Vicky, you started contributing to your pension plan last year. You have another 37 years in which to contribute. So you end up, from that company pension scheme, getting under £95 a week when you retire.
It just doesn't seem that much, really. At the moment, it doesn't sound that brilliant.
Peggy, you've been contributing to the company pension scheme for 12 years now, and that will give you a weekly income of £53.85.
Well, better than I thought it would have been. I didn't expect huge amounts, so I think it's what I expected, yeah.
Of course, Vicky and Peggy would also be entitled to a state pension. But how does Vicky feel about the difference between the total she could get and Carly, who doesn't contribute to the scheme at work?
To be honest, I think it's pretty crap. It's not fair. You're paying every month and you're not really rewarded that much. So it does sort of make you think, why? But I suppose now I've started it, I will carry on.
Browns, like many employers, says it's trying to do the best for staff at a difficult time. But to do better, companies, workers or government would have to put much more money into pensions. In the current climate, that won't happen. So many of us will just have to keep on working for as long as we can.
So a lot of anxiety about pensions, but what are the facts? Here's Justin again.
The figures suggest something of a pensions crisis. The old gold-plated final salary schemes are on their way out. 10 years ago, 2/3 of employees in company pension schemes were in final salary schemes. Now, just over a third are. But it gets worse. The number of people in the private sector with no occupational pension schemes at all has been steadily rising. So back in 1999, there were around 9 million. By the end of last year, there were more like 11 million. And it's the young who've been worst affected. 10 years ago, a third of under 35s contributed to a workplace pension scheme. Now, the figure's fallen to a quarter.
Paul, people put huge amounts of big chunks of their income into pensions every month. How can you be sure that it's worth it?
Well, first of all, you can't be sure because you're looking ahead 20, 30, 40 years. And what seems like a big amount to you, and did to those people we've just seen, may not be anything like enough to buy you the pension you think it will get you. And that really is the problem.
And Linda, people get more and more disillusioned, don't they? Because they just feel that the goalposts are forever being moved when it comes to pensions.
Yes, they do, and they're right, because in a sense, a lot of the pension schemes at the moment are just unaffordable because so many people are aging. So that means that if you look at the public sector pension schemes or even occupational pensions, there's a lot of deficits, and that is going to mean that people are going to have to either accept fewer benefits or retire later. I suppose what the government is doing on the state pension is that they're going to restore the link to average earnings. So that means that when we retire, our state pension might be slightly better, but again, that's going to come at the cost of us retiring later.
So at the end of the day, is it even worth getting a pension?
Yes, there are two big advantages with pensions. First of all, normally your employer is putting a big chunk of money in as well. If they match your contributions, that's well worth having. If you say no to that, you're saying no to a pay rise. Secondly, of course, they come out of your untaxed income, so you're getting tax relief on what you put in. The Treasury is subsidising you, and that costed a lot of money. So there are two big advantages, but ultimately, pensions are a matter of faith. I happen to believe in them. Not everyone does, but if you do believe in them, put as much as you can in for as long as you like.
Paul, Linda, thank you. Justin.
Well, if you don't have any faith in pensions, or you're already sorted on that front and have some money to spare, where on earth can you invest in the hope of getting the best return? That's what I've been trying to find out. In times of turmoil, people always look for a secure place to put their money. For thousands of years, gold has been one of the safest havens for our cash. So is it still? And if not, what is? I'm on a treasure hunt to try and find the best investment. And where better to start than a gold mine? Plans are underway to open Scotland's only commercial gold mine. It's made possible by a new gold rush, which sent the price of the metal up by 26% in a single year.
Gold prices are very high at the moment. Gold has been a store of wealth in uncertain times, and I think a lot of that obviously is reflected in the economic climate and political climate that we're in at the moment.
So where are gold prices headed in the future?
Most commentators would indicate that they're certainly over the next year to 2 years, there's still some strength in the price.
So you are literally sitting on a gold mine, aren't you? I'm going to visit some people who know a thing or two about investments to see if I can dig up a better bet than gold. First stop, Edinburgh and property. Despite all the uncertainty, average house prices rose by nearly 6% in the year to May. And in Edinburgh, a good deal more. But can it continue? Scott, how are you doing? I'm Justin. Scott Fraser is a property investor who has an eye for a bargain.
It's been a very fractured market. I think Edinburgh is probably reflective of most parts of the UK. There are some areas in Edinburgh where prices have held up and probably seen small rises. There are other areas where the price has significantly dropped.
So what about this increase in capital gains tax? Is that going to affect investors, do you think?
You know, the previous capital gains tax regime was, in all honesty, quite attractive for investors, less so now. So yeah, I think that'll definitely have a negative effect on property as an investment class. I think the secret, particularly in the current climate, is not to rely on the market to deliver that profit, but to secure your profit when you buy the property. Buy it at the right price, buy the right thing, and have a plan for the property.
If you're looking for a more liquid asset than property, my next destination may have something on the menu. Some exotic investments, such as fine wines, have put in a vintage performance, rising 32% in 12 months, outperforming both gold and property prices. So why is wine doing so well?
I think a lot of it's down to the effect of the Asian market driving the values up. Every day that goes by, there is a new millionaire or new wealthy individual created.
If you had to choose between wine and gold, why would you choose an insubstantial, kind of, if you like, a fashionable purchase like wine, rather than something, you know, that's held its value for thousands of years?
The beauty about fine wine is that every time somebody opens a bottle of, for example, this 97 Lafite, there's one less bottle in the world. Now with gold, they're still mining it, they're still producing it. So this is finite supply, reducing supply. Gold is an increasing supply.
I must say, I'm amazed by how much of an increase wine has delivered over the past year. But with all this financial instability, can it really go on being such a good investment? Well, who knows? More sober investors will be pleased to know that one of the traditional assets, stocks and shares, has also been doing well until recent wobbles, up 40% in the year to May. But can the market continue to go up and up? Laura Lambie of investment house Williams de Bro doesn't think so.
I don't think we're going to see another 40% rise this year. I think we're probably going to see high single-digit growth in the market over the medium term.
So looking ahead, we've got all this uncertainty in the market, you know, interest rates, public sector cuts, all that stuff. Should we be investing? Should people put their money into stocks and shares, do you think?
I think as a house we are positive on equities over the next 12 months.
So you're saying if you've got a bit of cash, it may be worth putting it on the market?
Not for everyone, because do remember it's a medium risk asset. It's not a low risk asset. So for anybody that's not prepared to take a medium level of risk, equities are not for them.
OK, so we know about the recent performance of our assets. But over time, what's the best investment? I'm headed back to the gold mine. Economist and investment advisor Jonathan Davis has been doing the sums. Right, so you laid out a picnic for me here, haven't you, Jonathan? So we've got everything. We've got shares, wine, gold and property. So over time, which is the best investment?
Well, over the last year, shares have performed amazingly at 40%.
So shares are the best investment?
Over that period. But over the last 10 years, the best performer has been gold, which has grown over 300%.
OK, 300%, I'm going for gold.
But more than that, over 20 years, this guy, wine, which amazingly has grown 1,300%.
That's incredible. So wine is the best investment?
There's never a single best investment. Everything has its time. And it's all about buying low and selling high.
It's about when you buy.
It's when you buy. It's not what you buy necessarily.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan. So that's it then. It's not what you invest in, but when you do it. And of course, there's always that old catch. If you think you found the perfect investment, someone else probably got there first. Well, that's nearly all we've got time for. Before we go, one final thought for the future from our experts. We've heard a lot over the last 3 weeks about how to survive tough times. So what is the key way to protect family finances over the next year, Paul?
The first thing, as we've said before, is pay off debt, start with the most expensive, and don't take on more debt, because that will make you stronger for any shocks the future holds.
Linda, your key tip?
I would say take advantage of the record low interest rates. Try and secure this on your mortgage. Try and fix it or track it for the next few years, because interest rates will inevitably go back to their normal levels.
And Martin, final word from you?
Well, structurally think about your money. Do a budget, see if you're spending more than you earn or the other way around. Then pain-free savings, every single thing you spend money on, see if you can save. And finally, if you still need to save more, start cutting back. Be disciplined, be aggressive, and you can save thousands.
Thank you to all of you. Well, for more information on what we've talked about in the series, do go to our website at bbc.co.uk/moneywatch. But from all of us here in London, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.